people speaking on the platform was Medea Benjamin and me. She did her speaking and I did. And they asked a couple of questions. And they asked her how she felt about something I said about Saudi Arabia. And then after my chance to talk, I told she has not been intricately involved. I was just telling them, Medea Benjamin, all the white folks and non-Muslims, they had non-Muslims write. Who was the guy who wrote some books on Islam? I think he has a Spanish name. I can't think of it. The right path, straight path.
I don't know if, but John Esposito.
John Esposito. Yeah, John Esposito. He got a Spanish name.
Right.
Yeah. Why did he go get all of these people? There was one lady from Lebanon that was speaking on a Christian lady. Why do they do all of that? Why do all of the groups in America, the ones that could do something, why they don't do nothing? Why they don't stand up? Why they don't? It's because they have been a victim of shaping and hurting. When we became a Muslim, way back when, in the 70s and early 80s, they talked about Ikhwan al-Muslimin. They talked about it. Half of them were Ikhwani. ISNA was founded on Jamaat Islami, Ikhwani. When we would have a big program, the Ikhwanis would ease through. They were already solidified. I mean, way back in the 80s. But in the 70s, 60s and 70s, when they were formed, that was their roots. Ikhwani types. Jamaat Islami types. Okay, let me get back to the program. Affirmations. This is movement affirmations about it relates to optimism, all of what we've talked about before, and what we say is program for the future. Changes based on joy and inspiration, linked with possibility thinking, not with what we've just been talking about, with past events. They do this to you, they do that to you. Pretty soon, they're shaping and they're forming your mentality, how you think. It's all technically, it's very simple. So we have to remove event thinking from we have removed event. Other people have removed event thinking from it. You don't hear anything about it. All you hear is they're afraid because of the Patriot Act. We're afraid because of this. We don't want to do that. They either say it or they act it out. Okay? We think it's a crime, but it's okay. Beyond event thinking, the events shaping you, the events influencing your direction, events shaping your planning and activity. If any of those incidences influence you, I'll put it this way, to the level that they influence you equals the amount of control the government has over your activity. So right now, if you looked at the Muslims, with what's been going on in the Muslim world, right? How much influence does the American government have on the Islamic movement in America? You would have to come to some conclusion that it's 75, 80%, you know. the less you could come up with is 65%, something like that. That they influence the movement in America that much. That means they're basically controlling the direction of Islam. It's nothing new. I don't care whether it's the black movement. That's the thing about longevity. You get a chance to pick up on all the patterns, man, from the 60s, and the 70s, and the 80s. And if you're around all that time, those patterns become ingrained in your psychic. So you can be involved in events, but the events don't shape your thinking. Let's say they shape your thinking 10, 15% maximum. But everybody else, they influence them 80%, 75%. You see, I don't believe that you will live in an environment and be in constant contact with your enemy without them having certain levels of influence. What you have to do is, on the highest level or a higher level, is okay. What we did the last two cycles we knew that we were surrounded by government. We just knew that this is the way it is. There's no big deal. So we have to use the people that come. That's why the little Bangladeshi brother used to live next door. The reason he moved is because, remember all those articles that was coming out at that time? I kept him so busy, right? So busy, and I'm monitoring that he said, I'm moving. That's why he moved. He didn't leave, but he moved, right? All right. Because we had been into, for a minimum of 10 years, that anybody that's coming here, we're going to give them a job. And we're going to minimize the problems that they get. That's just the thing that you have to do. So the last two cycles, that's what we did. That's why in Oakland, we had the Oakland community participate. When they thought they got their lock on the management and the leadership and everything, man, Abdul Malik had it going on. I remember I was speaking at Long Beach University of California in Long Beach. This is a guy, the head of African American Studies, had been in Tanzania for a long time. And he knew about me. He said, yeah, we knew that you came, and then you left a package, money. Abdul Malik didn't know it. I'm talking about at the University of San Francisco, Muhammad Babu. Did you ever listen to all the Malcolm tapes? And he said, his brother called Muhammad Babu. He said, this is revolutionary. Muhammad Babu, when I went to Muhammad Babu's office, he was the head of urban planning and countrified renewal or something. In other words, he had an office at the State House in Tanzania. I went to his office. I gave him my passport. I said, that is not me. I'm not here to do any. I had a letter of introduction. From one of his friends, and that I was living with in Algeria temporarily. Kofi Bashar, read Malcolm X's book. Kofi Bashar And I found out some years ago he was still alive and he was over here, down in Santa Barbara. But Kofi Bashar was Kwame Nkrumah's press secretary. I was living with his press secretary. Remember, when your crew goes out, Kwame Nkrumah was out in Ghana. So everybody that's in his crew gotta go too. So his press secretary was doing press work in Algeria. So therefore he was in on everything. I was living at a villa out in Moretti Villa, they call it. In those days, that was a touristy part in Algeria, about 20 miles from the city, 15 miles from the city. He was living out there too, but he was living not in the tourist part, in the other part, and I used to get out and run every day. So he saw me, he said, you're spending a lot of money at that, for them it was a lot of money, I was rich though. But he said, why don't you come stay with me? I said, sure, heck yeah. So I come and stayed with him for a little or nothing. He had a nice place out there. Anyway, when I left, he gave me a letter. He said, you're going to Black Africa, going to Tanzania, take this letter. He wrote a letter to his friend, Muhammad Babu. In the 70s and 80s, Muhammad Babu had came over here and was a professor at San Francisco State. Abdul Malik them knew it. Abdul Malik them knew the whole history. They knew on African history, African culture, black history. They knew I had to be an expert on it. They never, Abdul Malik would go everywhere and speak on black people like he knew what he was talking about. He read the damn books. Everybody he would talk about was a friend of mine. I said, W.L. Nolan, da-da-da-da. He went read a book on W.L. Nolan. W.L. Nolan is the one that taught to fight the Soledad brothers, Fleeta John Gold, George Jackson. He the one gave manhood training because he was a fighter. His cousin was my best friend. They both fighters. So he wasn't no professional fighter, but his brother, Cornell Nolan, was, they could fight. So in the street, they would be bad niggas, you know what I mean, in those days. They may not be a championship fighter, but for the street, boy, remember they used to have that's a tough nigga. That used to be big. In our neighborhood, those were the most famous guys. When I came up, was them tough niggas, right? So, W.L. Nolan was the one who gave the Soledad brothers manhood training at Soledad prison. They shot W.L. Nolan in the yard, 1968. Down there at WPFW, whatever that is. When I mentioned that at that 2001 program down that we had at the press club, remember that? One of the famous Negroes used to be head of the press, used to be head of Muhammad Speaks. I ain't gonna get into it. But you know what he told me? We went to Sudan together. He said, yeah. And we used to hang together because we was talking about all the old ministers doing the nation and all old history in detail. Me and him was talking about it. He knows my history. He said, yeah, man, that was my first assignment. W.L. Nolan in California. So he knows the history. When we was at the UN, we both came back around 4 o'clock in the morning. I think that was the first train from New York to D.C. So it was early in the morning. So that time we stayed with Iranians, they had certain, and we talked. He knew everything. He knew the way I was talking with him and the way I was talking with all the brothers. He knows, but you never hear it over there. When he would say, well, you should go through the minister. I said, hell, go through the minister. The minister don't know nothing about none of this. The people over there asked me a lot of questions about certain people. One of the questions they asked, when they die, do they believe that they go to a spaceship? I said, yes, they do. The mothership. I described it to them. 1 mile wide, 1 mile, have 1,500 bombing planes on it. They can bore into the earth. And, well, who's up there? Well, God is up there. And now the Lamb, the messenger. There's no messenger after I said, well, you haven't been on the mothership. Or you see. I said, and the same person you be jumping up and down about. I said, y'all forgot the lectures. I said, when he came and visited the Islamic program that Saddam Hussein was having, I don't know how I got on this subject, but Saddam Hussein had an Islamic program in 1987 or 88. I say, and he went over to that program as a representative of Islam in America. I said, when he came back, he was beamed up to the mothership, and he got a lecture out on it. I don't know if I have it here, but I got it. He was beamed up. He's still around. Maybe not much longer, but he got beamed up live and in person on the mothership. Yes, he did. And Master, whatever his name is, was there, and the Lamb, without spot or blemish, they was both there. And you should have seen him squirming, trying to explain that when he, at lecture. Did you say this? Well, but anyway, all of the people know what we're about here. They can't find no scratches, no rank. If they black, there was no representative in black Africa at that time that came back here and organized to do something. There's just not any. And they carried on the same tradition, except to go into Islam. Imam Jamil did. He came back here, but he was mad at Negroes. You know why? Because Negroes didn't send him any money. When he was on the news, H. Rap Brown, everybody, yeah. But when he got over there, they didn't look out for him. He was mad about that. He didn't look, he told me about it, so he didn't forget it. I don't want to be telling none of our business. But anyway, he didn't forget it. He told me about that in 81, 82, 83. He told me about it in detail. In detail. So man, they didn't look out for me. So, if you would mention something to him about the brothers of black people, remember down in Atlanta they had the little short chubby guy supposed to kill all them children? Mm-hmm. Remember that? Mm-hmm. And one of the guys he supposed to threw over a bridge was a big 200-300-pound guy. And I said, how y'all dealing with that? I said, they doing the brother wrong down there. He ain't our brother. I said, well, you think he could drag somebody out? That little short puffy, you know how he, remember him? I said, you think he can handle, dead weight is different. When you got dead weight, you can pull it and it slip right back down. Or you try to grab it and just, it ain't the same as somebody alive that'll help you. I said, you think he was able to do that? Yeah, brother. In other words, how people was treated had something to do with their attitude. We have to minimize its effect. That's what I'm trying to say. Minimize the effect of those events. So those events, and I'll get to right now. Right now, what we're doing, something I experienced in 1968, and it works, is when we moved from one level of what we was doing to another. That was a big jump in Oakland at that time. From 68, 69, 70 and on, okay. Well, I'll tell you what I was doing. I was in temporary retirement. I got rich, well, nigger rich at that time. You know, when you're 22 years old, and you got, at that time, $25,000, like $250,000 cash money, and you got 2 pretty Cadillacs and all that other stuff to go with it. So there was a lot of game going on that I was not familiar with. So I pulled back for a minute. It was this time of the year. I pulled back and I just, I was tripping. I put on my favorite album at that time, Wish It Would Rain by The Temptations. And I just sit back and listen to it over and over again. And I ain't been smoking some weed there because that's what, you know, I didn't do in the first years, but by that time, I tried some weed and I said, oh, this is what everybody buying this stuff for. Anyway, so I was in semi-retirement. No, I was in real, for me, I would make $50 or $100 a day, just enough where I didn't spend no old money. And then you accumulate. So I was visualizing. I didn't know what they called it then, but I was just tripping. I saw limousines pulling away from the curb and businesses. I was just visualizing that. In less than a year, all of that was a reality. In less than a year, all of that was a reality. And then, after I've been studying white folks, they call it visualization. You just visualize what they, right, all the motivation. They say, you want to visualize yourself driving down the street in that new Rolls Royce, right? Visualize yourself. And I said, well, I've been doing that. I've been doing that for over 50 years. So now let's call it visioneering.